Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Yanina Dore, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Hello, wine friends, and welcome to today's episode where we are diving into the rich and diverse world of Turkish wine with over 1,400 indigenous grape varieties and 8,000 years of winemaking history. Turkey is a hidden gem in the wine world, and you may be surprised to learn that Gouais Blanc, a grape from ancient Mesopotamia, so this is the modern-day Turkey, Iraq, and Syria, is believed to be the parent of at least 80 European varieties, including Chardonnay, Gamay, Riesling, Chenin Blanc, Furmint, Blaufränkisch, Aligoté, which we mentioned in the Ukrainian episode 205. The list goes on. So this episode was inspired by a book available on Amazon. I'll leave the links in the show notes. The book is called Turkish Wine, A Heritage Reborn. And this uncovers Turkey's deep-rooted wine culture and the story of Olus from Vinolus Winery. I'll be joined by Sila, the daughter of Olus, and wine writer Bronwen Batey, who helped bring this incredible story to an English-speaking audience. Now, this episode, we're going to focus on two white grape varieties that you need to know about and definitely try, Narince and Emir. But before we go to the chat, I want to ask you, have you checked out winemasters.tv? If you are after more deep dives into the world of wine, then you need to check out this premium streaming platform with over 127 episodes, covering everything from legendary wine regions to cutting edge production techniques. They've got an amazing series featuring wine experts like Jamie Good, exploring the science of wine, Andreas Larsson and Susie Barry, Master of Wine, leading masterclasses on the world's greatest wines, and even Loic Pasquet, the visionary winemaker behind the most expensive wine. That's Liber Pata, by the way. And no, I have never tried it. Very sad story. But hey, if you are passionate about wine, go check out winemasters.tv. I have a special link. It is in my show notes. But now, pour yourself that glass of wine and get ready to explore Turkey's fascinating wine scene. So I have to say, I've never interviewed two people at once. This is a lot of pressure for me. So do you promise to make it easy for me?
We'll talk over each other.
Yeah, we will do our best.
That is not making it easy for me. Right. What I would love for you both to do is introduce yourselves for everybody listening. So perhaps, Sila, if you'd like to go first.
Yes.
And please add some sparkle.
Yes, of course. My name is Sila, Serim, and I'm the daughter of the winery owner and founder, Olus. The winery is called Vinolus. It's located in Cappadocia. I've been living in London for 6 years, and I'm currently working in the wine merchant Warmit Wines. Yeah.
I didn't know. Okay. I'm learning. Every day's a school day. Continue, please.
And because I grew up in the wine industry, it's kind of like naturally happened to me. But what I realized is the more I discovered different regions and different wines, the passion developed more and more. So I basically come to London to taste a lot of different wines, learn about the wines more. And in the end, my long-term plan is to go back to the winery and lead the second generation with my knowledge that I learn here.
I love that. And we will get to your mother. If you've got your mother's training and some London influence, oh my God, there's nothing can stop you. And Bron, tell us about why are you here? Why are you in the wine chair?
I know, exactly. I'm asking myself.
That wasn't the intention, why I asked it that way.
Next to Sila, next to the next generation of great Turkish winemakers. No, my background, I have the WSET diploma. I'm a wine writer and have dilly-dally a little bit in the wine industry. And while I was actually studying for my WSET diploma about a year and a half ago, one of my fellow students called Pinar, she's actually Turkish, and she's actually one of the contributors in the book. If you see the book, her name is Pinar. And she approached me saying that there was this book that was being put together about this very well-known woman wine producer in Turkey. And I was like, okay. And she said, look, I know you've got a bit of a background in journalism, you've got a bit background in content marketing. Would we're looking for somebody to help with the potential translation of some of the chapters, because some of them would be written in Turkish and translated into English, because the book is in English. And so a lot of the contributors to the book might not necessarily speak English as a first language. So I think I was initially intrigued, because my first question was, I didn't know that Turkey had a very big wine industry or wine culture. So I was intrigued, but then I think there was a bit of a mystery around it. I wanted to find out more. So I was actually really excited. And so about 6 months later, the first chapter started coming through. And my co-editor, who was sending me the chapters, who is an academic, he's Turkish, but lives in Europe. He is an academic. And so I was a little bit scared to start off with. So I thought all these chapters would be completely over my head and academic. But actually it was the opposite. Sure, out of the 16 chapters, there are a lot of academics and scientists and real experts and specialists in their fields, but there's also chefs and there's sommeliers and there's wine experts, lots of different contributors from different fields. And I think for me, it was the story that just enveloped me. And it was really showcasing a celebration of sort of Turkish wine culture that was unfamiliar to me. So every single chapter was, just a real learning for me and got me really passionate about Turkish wines and culture. And so here I am. Yeah.
Well, do you know what? I couldn't agree more. So you've sent me the book, and of course I did my homework, and I'm reading through it. And for everybody who will put in the show notes where you can find this book and read this book. But I thought, okay, so it's about this one winery. Okay, all right. Well, how much can you put in there? But not only through all these really interesting chapters written by different people. So I think that's fascinating. It's not you can actually almost pick a chapter and then go backwards. You can go all over the place if you want, can't you? But I found it fascinating how you not only get to learn all about Turkey, but actually coming back effectively to the same woman, an incredibly inspiring woman. So Sila, can you actually perhaps talk a little bit about your family's winemaking history and why I personally am really inspired drinking these wines and why perhaps other people might want to be as well?
Yes, of course. So the estate dates back to 1940s. It's again located in the Cappadocia region of Turkey, which is central. And it was a farm in the beginning. So there was agricultural production happening, but there was no grapes. Then in the 1980s, there was some vineyards built, but it was just for the table grapes. It was not for winemaking. And my mom's childhood, actually, she grew up within that farm. And I think her love for nature comes from there. And over the years, she studied biology. And I think that puts a lot of more strength when it comes to her love for nature and respect for nature. And she was always passionate about wine as well. So I think at one part, she combined both together. And she basically founded the winery in 2007. But we released our first vintage in 2009, which it was great. And so she was the first woman winery owner within the region. But at the same time, she's the first organic agriculture and viticulture in the area. She started an association in the region called Cappadocia Organic Association. And she was the first, and now there is 70 different farmers within that region as well. So she kind of inspired others as well, not just for the winemaking, but just for an organic and sustainable farming as well.
I think that was the bit that I thought was like kind of truly remarkable about her. It's also really cool to be the first person in a whole region to start organics, then push it forward and educate people so they do it. And then as a woman winemaker, I think she's been inspiring others. So I was just thinking, from your perspective, what has it been like to actually just see her lead in all these areas?
I mean, it was great to see it, but I saw the challenges that come with it as well, of course.
Okay.
But she was always positive and optimistic, and she's quite stubborn. I think that is one of her secret talents.
Not a bad thing.
Exactly. But she's very communicative as well. She's very understanding, and I think that's why people listen to her. And because she connected to the local people, but she comes from a multicultural background because my great-grandma is German. And she kind of connected with people internationally as well. So I think that's kind of what made her so touch the people. She guided them. She didn't, force these kind of methods. She communicated to them and she made them understand why these things are important and show the potential that comes with it. And this is what kind of made it, I think.
I think it's interesting for me understanding, the area that Olus has her vineyard is actually quite a conservative area of Turkey. And so for a woman to not only, obviously own and run and manage her own farm and vineyard, but also to lead in all these different initiatives and organizations, she's a real pioneer in many areas. But when you meet her, she's very gentle and very kind and very open. And I think that was what really hit me. I've read all, literally there's a list as long as your arm of all these incredible achievements that she's done and still doing. And yet when you meet her, she's just this very kind, welcoming, warm, lovely person who, and just loves wine, has this real passion for what she's doing. And so I think it's inspiring, to be around her, which is great.
And apart from the fact that she sounds so inspiring, especially when I read all about her character. But what I love when it comes to that organic wine making, it sounds to me like it's not just organics, which is, don't spray chemicals, but she's actually going from a much more holistic philosophy. Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, I think so, because I think it comes from the passion. It's not just about the viticulture. It's about the organic farming, but it all comes from the respect for nature. I think during her studies, she kind of did her master's on ecodiversities as well. So I think the more she studied, the more respect she had. And she kind of get this philosophy to adapt to the nature as well. And I think that's where it comes from, because it's a passion rather than just an idea.
It's all about passion. Everyone, whatever it is, whatever your passion is, follow it and nothing else matters, right? Okay, so we've talked about a little bit about your family's history, but Turkey's winemaking history is impressive. And reading the book, I mean, we have that argument, don't we? Armenia, Georgia, what's the cradle of wine? But actually, Turkey really needs to be in here. And I don't think is as well screamed and shouted about that this could be the cradle of vines, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, if we start talking about the history of Turkey, how much time we have, because it's going to be quite long. But yeah, you're right. It's where proof of viticulture comes from as well. Domesticated viticulture comes from is Mesopotamia region, which is included in Turkey as well. It's the eastern side of Turkey, southeastern is the Mesopotamia region. And there's a lot of ancient civilization that has proved that basically did winemaking within those lands. One of the major ones is Hittites. Hittites were living in the area and doing winemaking, and they have a lot of proof that we can show nowadays that they were actually doing winemaking laws and viticulture laws as well at the same time.
I think in your book, it says these were like the first wine laws in the world.
Well, I think it was more because they ruled sort of around, I think it's 1600s, something like that, BC.
Yeah.
So, and what I found fascinating when I was reading is that, they're probably one of the most important civilizations,
right,
for the wine world that we never heard about. And because viticulture was not only very much ingrained and part of their day-to-day life, but they were also, as you mentioned, one of the first to create these laws around viticulture, possibly, first wine laws, because there are these hundreds and hundreds of these really well-preserved tablets that have been left behind, which highlight things like, which plots to grow wines in, how to grow wines, stakes, how to stake the wine.
Oh, how interesting. Written on tablets. I just don't even, my mind is blown.
And this is, the time of the Egyptians. I just think that's what my mind gets blown as well. So, this history is, and that's just one civilization that was involved. So.
Yeah, and throughout the years there was other civilizations as well. And there's one of the second important parts is the Ottoman era, that it comes onto history of the Turkish winemaking. So there's the ancient part, then the Ottoman era, which kind of protected and continued this kind of wine culture as well. As most of you know, it's a 600 years of empire, which is between 1299 to 1922, and it was quite recent actually. And basically it was a Muslim kind of empire, but there was a lot of different ethnicities within that empire, included Christians, and there was also Greeks and Armenians and many other ethnicities, and these ethnicities still continued to do the winemaking and consumption as well. At the same time, the Muslims within the region, they were not allowed to consume or produce, but the other ethnicities did. So that kind of protected the wine culture. In the 19th centuries, when the phylloxera hit Europe as well, Ottoman Empire exported a lot of wines to Europe and actually helped them. And this is crazy because in 1904, the amount of wines that they exported is 340 million liters, which is 4 times what we produce today.
I wrote that down in one of my wine facts that I learned from the book. I was like, that is shocking. Absolutely. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And with the fall of Ottoman Empire, the modern Republic of Turkey established in 1923. With the new Republic of Turkey, some of the ethnicities left Turkey, and these ethnicities were the main ones that did the winemaking. And Atatürk supported winemaking as well, so he established a monopoly, and he basically brought some experts from France to support this kind of winemaking culture as well. But this kind of, in the long run, this kind of lacked the private investments within the area. And because of that, the wine making and consumption was more of mass production until the 1990s. And after the 1990s, there were interest started to grow towards the indigenous grape varieties, and the boutique wineries started to build. And once the boutique wineries started to build, it shifted the focus towards higher quality, less intervention, organic and sustainable kind of winemaking, and which is where we are at the moment in Turkey.
But that was a whirlwind history of Turkish wine.
It wasn't bad. I mean, honestly, I highly advise everyone listening, like really go back and read this book and figure out the history of Turkey. Because I was surprised as well that they've done, mentioned in the book, I've learned so much. They've done tests of like just the seeds and stuff to find out where the oldest vines were. And actually currently the oldest seed vines they found have been in Turkey. That's
mad.
Which I just think is really cool. And we are talking, I think they at least 8,000 or 8,500 years before Christ. This is kind of the timings, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's mad.
Okay. I don't know where I want to go now. I don't know whether I want to talk about wine regions or wine, but I feel thirsty. And you mentioned, I feel like, come on, it's 13 minutes in now. Like, let's do this. So we will get to the wine regions, everybody listening. I think we might do it as we pour, but let's start with, and I'm going to pronounce it beautifully, the white grape variety, Narince.
Beautiful.
Did I do great?
Amazing. Amazing.
We are going to pretend that you didn't tell me that just before we pressed record. For everybody looking on a label, you're going to see it spelt Narince, as in a C and E on the end, which is so crazy that you pronounce that J, Narince.
I think it's a beautiful Narince. It's a lovely.
It makes me think of a bird, actually, to be honest. It's never a bad thing. So, right. I'm going to pour. I have a bottle of Organic Vineyards Narince 2022. Now, in theory, because things never actually go to plan, you're supposed to be drinking the same, but you're not, are you?
No. So we are drinking Narince 2022. So what's interesting at the vineyard in Vinolus, at the winery, they do produce 2 styles of Narince, and it's mainly terroir driven. So the first style, which you are having, which is the organic Narince. I'll just give you, in terms of, they do about 1,000 bottles a year of that current vintage. And that is grown at Vinolus. Obviously, Vinolus is at about 1,150 above sea level. So there's altitude. This is a continental climate, gets very cold, it snows. These are also from about 15-year-old vines. And this is quite a volcanic area. So you've got to sort of keep that in mind when you think of terroir. What we are drinking is Narince, but from Tokat, which, let me know if I'm saying this right. It's from a little bit more north towards the Black Sea. So it's still in Anatolia, but it's much more north. And where this vineyard is, it's slightly much lower altitude. It's a little bit wetter. It has more maritime influence. So you're naturally going to see maybe how this beautiful, lovely indigenous grape variety, the profile slightly changes depending on its terroir, of course.
And Tokat is the where Narince grapes comes from.
Okay, interesting. So that's kind of, I guess, the birthplace. And then the question is, as well, hasn't this only been recently rediscovered? That's what I read. So what's the story behind the grape? Did it disappear?
So I'm not exactly sure about that, because the thing is, Narince also used for stuffed wine leaves. Like they used the wine leaves to make the stuffed wine leaves. So there was a lot of production of the vineyards just for that purpose. So I'm not exactly sure on if it was revived, but for winemaking, yes, for sure.
Wow. Okay. So it's more a case of maybe, regardless of how long the grapes were actually just kind of growing there, no one was paying any attention to making wine from the grapes. They were just taking the leaves.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's quite, from what I've learned as a newbie still, is, pre sort of 1990s and sort of going into this more private investment stage, a lot of the larger sort of state-run wineries really focused on international grape varieties predominantly. I mean, there's obviously exceptions to everything, but because that's what they thought consumers wanted. They could pronounce the names, they could, they understood what a Bordeaux blend meant, etc. So you'll see a lot of the older, larger, more commercial wineries, really focus on international grapes. But since the 1990s, there's been this sort of shift towards, really celebrating and trying to understand the indigenous grapes, which I'm sure you've read and got your facts, Janina, that, there's like 1,400 recorded indigenous grape varieties, which Narince is just one of them. But of that, about around 60 are now being used and being for wine, which is incredible. But I think, with exceptions, I think, in the old days, sort of pre-1990, it was, more sort of international grape varieties. So even though Narince has been around, it's probably only really starting to come into its fore now, because of this sort of investment and interest and wanting to celebrate, their international grape varieties.
Yes, exactly. And it's a highly adaptable grape as well. So it's grown within different regions of Turkey.
So what you said that the home is Tokat, but actually, so your home vineyards are in, can you please pronounce it? Cappadocia?
Cappadocia.
Okay, Cappadocia. Okay, so Cappadocia, that is where you're based. And as you've just said, Ron, very mountainous, very continental, super extreme winters, volcanic soils. Everything about that for me screams, yes, wine region. I want, yeah, but don't go in the winter, obviously. That bit doesn't scream much to me. So are you finding now that this grape variety is doing really, really well in Cappadocia? Oh my God, say it again.
Cappadocia.
Cappadocia, that's it. Like the car Kia. Anyway, Cappadocia. Okay, so is it growing, the amount of Narince that's being grown in Turkey, in this region? Is it becoming more of a thing?
Yes, it is becoming more of a thing. And the other wine regions also doing the same thing, because again, the grape itself is very terroir driven and it's very adaptable. So you can find very different styles. They sometimes use it in blends as well. But I think I really like what this grape does in the Cappadocia region, because I love the minerality that adds to this grape to the wines. That's one of the parts that I love about it.
Well, that's interesting because, okay, I'm the one that's got this wine, which, by the way, everybody, if you like the tasting note that I'm about to give, actually, this is the one wine that you can get in the UK, and you can get it for £18.10. Not this specific vintage, I don't believe. Maybe. I'm not sure. Anyway, check it out. But from Vino Turco, and I'll put that in the show notes. But this, what I love, and we were saying this off air a little bit, but is that this is a indigenous grape variety, but it's so commercially satisfying. It's not taking you to flavors that are a bit interestingly weird. It's not about drinking it for the purpose of drinking a new variety. Like, I get like a Viognier-esque nose and palate, but with this kind of ashy, mineral, stony edge with it, and even like maybe a tiny bit smoky. And then I was thinking, is this coming from some oak, or is it coming from the soil, or both? Because there's just a brightness, a real richness to this wine. So, Sila, can you just tell me just a little bit about how this is made, just so I can work out if I actually know what I'm talking about?
Yes, of course. So the one that you're having actually has a bit more oak than one we are having, but it's all oak. So the effect of the oak is not as high. And the one that we are having, the percentage is lower. The ashiness also comes from the soil as well. So there's a combination of both of them together from the effect. But the main, because when we are going to taste Emir, you will see, because there's no oak within that, you will see how the terroir actually reflects the grape itself as well. It's the volcanic soil that contributes to the wine.
Our tasting notes when we did have the organic, for me, it was like licking a stone. I put and a little bit, I mean, compared to the one we've got, the acidity is just a little bit fresher.
Okay, yeah.
On what you've got, and I think that's just altitude helping. And I mean, for me, I may be completely wrong, but I felt like when I was with the organic one was like, I don't know, a really well-made sort of Assortico or even a Pinot Grigio. I don't know. It's got, but like you said, I think it's very approachable. This is an international wine. This is not, this is very quaffable. And it's, the other thing I was going to say about the names, because I know the names can always be a bit tricky, but Narince actually means delicate.
Yeah.
Oh.
And what I love about that is that it's sort of giving you a hint, as long as you know the translation, of course, it's giving you a hint of what to expect, which this is actually a really lovely, sort of lighter, quite easy drinking, quite quaffable wine to me, but it's got some complexity. I mean, our tasting notes, funnily enough, on the one from Tokat, I think would be quite different because it's that lower altitude, a bit of maritime, it's a bit wetter. I mean, it's much more tropical.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting. There's pineapple and mango and yellow melon and even some white jasmine. It's quite different. So I think it's quite interesting, and even sort of satsuma on the finish.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I do actually get like a nectarine edge with this. But I have to say, like when you mentioned about a Pinot Gris, well, you said Pinot Grigio, I would say like if someone thinks of a Pinot Gris, the slightly rounder, more aromatic, peachier style of Pinot Gris, then yes. Like Viognier, just to make clear, typically doesn't have high acidity for anyone listening. And so when I say that this reminds me of Viognier, it's the roundness on the palate, but also the lovely peachiness. But yeah, licking a stone. This is like licking a stone and licking a peach, licking them both at the same time. So if anyone doesn't know what that is, go and do it. It's fine. A peach is rather cheap at the supermarket and a stone is free. So
together, it's a miracle.
Honestly, but I've really enjoyed this because the aromatics, the complexity, the length, really fab. Like hands down, your whites are just superb. So let us go to the other grape variety, Emir. Everybody, you're going to be very happy that Emir is spelt E-M-I-R. Exactly said how it is spelt. So I'm feeling much more comfortable and with this one.
And this is fun too, because Emir, I love my names. And
what does it mean?
It means leader or strong, or what are the other? I mean, it means a few things. Ruler. So,
interesting.
How I try to sort of think about it is that it's got, this is the slightly bigger brother or bigger sister to Narince. It's a little bit bigger, a bit more fuller bodied, etc. But I love the fact that, anything that I can associate with something, a name or a visual makes my life easier. And so Emir is really, really interesting that way. So this Emir they've made about 2,000 bottles at Vinolus, and retails, we think, obviously it's at the moment it's not available in the UK, but it would retail at about £25.
Well, that's interesting, because actually this was my favorite. I love both of them, but for me, and this is the clincher, it is the steely, like, mineral vibes that I was so, as soon as you mentioned it, this is like, for me, the linearity. The Narince was much kind of rounder in my palate, and this one's much more cuts through, and oh my gosh, like, so both of them are beautiful, but I love this. Now, Emir, is this the most renowned indigenous white grape variety of Turkey?
No, I think that's Narince, because it's more widely planted across Narince. In Cappadocia region, Emir thrives. Other regions, it's not very adaptable, so it's mostly focused on the Cappadocia region, but you can see why as well when you're tasting it.
I mean, I thought the structure of the wine is sort of similar, I don't know, like a Chablis, but with a little bit more, I guess, fruit forward. I don't know.
It's really interesting. Like, it's not as intense as an Assyrtiko. And it's interesting that you mentioned the Assyrtiko for the Narince. But for me, I was actually saying it has this, in fact, it's almost like maybe an Assyrtiko, a rich Grüne Veltliner. And I really like you touching on the Chablis because of that really kind of chalky, striking, bright acidity. But at the same time, it's difficult because this is its own grape variety. But I think all of these grapes, that's what I really liked about them. That you can kind of play around and say, if Grüne Veltliner and Chablis had a love child, this might be it. So everybody who's used to drinking X, Y, and Z wines, this is just another lovely new experience, but you aren't going to be disappointed, or you're not going to be left feeling a bit cheated, going, okay, well, good. I tried something, move on. Like, for me, I now want to try another Narince. I want to try your other one. I want to compare because they're so good and they're so interesting.
I think this is interesting because this Emir is mainly from old bush vines, 40 years plus. I think that's what, it's quite exciting for me across the whole of Turkey. There's all these old vineyards. Some are obviously have been pulled up or some have been left. But there's a lot of these old vineyards that people are discovering and a lot of old vines. And this is a good example of, a very traditional bush vine in Cappadocia, with some age. And it's starting to really show, I think, and like you said, I think it's a really lovely wine.
Yeah. And it's fascinating because also you've got this kind of, this very elegant, distinctive, for me, almost like, there's even like some pear drops in there, and then like Parma violets and even blueberries. Like, it takes me just down this road it's very pretty, that's very just super elegant. But it's more than the fruits, ignoring that and the flavors, it's this texture that just kind of cuts through your mouth, and it's just so bright. So now that makes me so fascinated with Cappadocia. Did I say it right? Yes, Cappadocia. Because of quite extreme continental volcanic terroir this place has. So is this a region, and again, excuse my ignorance, but it wasn't in the book, so how was I supposed to know? Is this a more major region? What is the most major wine growing region of Turkey?
So it's one of the big wine growing regions, but it's not the biggest. The biggest one is Thrace.
Okay. In the west. Mm-hmm.
Yes, west, near the border between Bulgaria and Greece, until the Gallipoli, and Aegean as well, and most of the wineries located, actually. I think Aegean region does the 30% of the production, and Thrace does, I think, around 15%. Yeah.
Okay. So that's almost half.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine. So actually, and Cappadocia is within the Anatolia wine region, which obviously has lots of different parts. Is this Cappadocia the most highest altitude of all of them?
Not particularly, because you can find higher altitudes across Turkey, but I wouldn't particularly say it's the highest, because if you go to the eastern and southeastern, there's quite high altitude as well. Even if you go to the southern parts, there's still high altitude, because the average altitude of Turkey is nearly 1,000 meters. So there's a lot of mountain areas we are talking about. Even if it's like across the Aegean side, there's still mountains that actually some of the wineries tries from them, because it still helps with the acidity and the freshness of the grapes.
Okay, interesting. It's so funny, isn't it? Because I think when people think of Turkey, especially if they're thinking about holidaying, it's the beaches, which of course don't have altitude. Okay, so question then, Cappadocia, because we want I'm just inspired by the terroir, the volcanic, and I want everyone to come. I want to come. So I just want to know a little bit more about how does this stand compare in terms of styles from the rest of the country? Are you typically always going to get the most minerality and a lot of freshness?
I would say most of the time, because of the volcanic aspect, and
that's the main bit.
Yeah, and the altitude as well, of course, come with it. And it's a high diurnal range as well within the region. Mm-hmm. So it's continental climate. And because of that, the cold nights as well helps with the acidity and the flavors of the grape. But there is a bit of volcanic aspect in the Thrace region as well. So it's not continental climate there. The northern parts of Thrace is more of maritime. Central is have a mild continental with a bit old volcanic soils, and the southern part is more Mediterranean. So you might find there's a lot of microclimates in Turkey. So you might
okay, I'm getting that now. It's a little bit of everything. All right, thanks. That's not helping us, is it?
But I think it's really interesting. What surprised me was, like we just talked about, the sheer size of Turkey. I mean, it's, again, I have been to Turkey, but like you said, I've been to the beaches. It's 3 times the size of the UK, and it has all these different microclimates, even though the wine regions aren't, there's no AOC or anything like that. They're not formally mapped out. They have these wine regions that each are influenced by something, whether it's maritime, altitude, soil, lack of rain, too much rain, continental, etc., which only means, what I think is exciting, only means that there's a huge diversity of grape varieties, of styles, of producers. So it's not just, you can't just say there's one type of Turkish wine at all. It's not homogenous. And that's what's quite fun, is that it's quite terroir driven because of this huge country that has so much to offer. And going back to your sort of slightly touristy thing, what I find really exciting is that, we are, as Brits, when we go, whether it's to Istanbul or to the Aegean coast or wherever, the Mediterranean, what I found really exciting is that every single tourist hub has got a wine region. There are vineyards that you can visit from that tourist hub. You just have to seek them out or find them. But I find that fascinating, that, it's like an extra thing that you can do when you go to Turkey. And I didn't know that, and I think it's really exploring Turkey in a different way.
So the fact is that everyone now knows it's obligatory when you go to Turkey that you have to go to a wine region. So we've got, it doesn't matter which region, just no excuse, book in at least a day. So that's good. If they were to come to Cappadocia, this is actually a place that does have a lot of tourism, doesn't it? Because of the landscape and because of its history. Am I right? That's, again, everyone listening, this is all I've learned from the book. It's not like... I know I'm sounding rather educated right now, but right? That's what you guys have put in the book?
Yes, that's correct. It's very ancient cities and civilizations through there. So people come there to explore those areas, and, history fans come there to see most of the things. But there's balloons as well. I think most of the people that listening know Cappadocia. There's air balloons that people are basically knowing and recognizing.
Oh, is this a famous spot for hot air ballooning?
Yeah. I think if you imagine the landscape of Cappadocia is these huge geological sort of shapes that come out of the soil. Yeah. So it's almost sort of quite Star Warsy. And then you have these hot air balloons, these incredible pictures of these hot air balloons going through this incredible landscape.
Oh my
And then it's famous for its caves and cave hotels, four-wheel driving, etc. I mean, it's quite a famous sort of touristy area.
So we call
you're selling it.
we call the volcanic shape fairy chimneys, basically.
Fairy chimneys.
Yeah, I don't know where the name comes from, actually.
I'm loving the name.
So-
Yes, fairy chimneys. The land. I want to go to the land of fairy chimneys and Emir and Narince.
Yes, and another interesting thing as well, in the region, there's underground cities that dig for 85 meters below the ground, and it goes from like 9 to 10 kilometers. It's very interesting. I mean, if you're claustrophobic, I wouldn't recommend to going there because you need to crawl
Hell yeah.
with a guide, but it lasts like around 1.5 and 2 hours. It's quite interesting as well, which is
You have to crawl.
some parts. Yeah, you have to crawl in some parts because they're quite narrow tunnels in there as well. And which is another interesting
Wow.
thing because these caves are amazing for cellars and aging the wine too. That's actually what was one of the purposes that it was built for as well, to store food and wine and other kind of things.
That's incredible. So, hang on, whoa, but people are living in parts underground. They're not.
So it hosts 20,000 people, more or less. It's quite big. Yeah.
Wait, hang on. Whoa, let me just get this straight. So Turkey is still a very sunny country, regardless of like continental. Let's just talk about in the summer. Everyone's just going out, having a great day. And there are people that are just living under 20,000 people decided to just hide from daylight.
Yeah, I suppose so back in the time.
Back in the time.
Yeah, not now.
Okay. I mean, you know what? Interesting choice. But wines are being aged in certain parts of this underground area.
Because the soil is very easily carvable. The way we do is as well in our winery, basically under the winery, there's carved caves that we still store the wine and age the wine as well.
Yes, love it. Okay, to finish off this episode, we've talked about 2 quite iconic white grape varieties, and of course you do them. Are you doing any other wines from indigenous grape varieties? White. We're not doing red yet. White. Or is there other white grape varieties just in general that people should put on their list? And not too many. We know that there's 1,400.
Well, we are not doing any other indigenous grape varieties, but if you explore other regions, there's Sultania that you might come across. There's Bornova Muscadet, so it's basically Muscadet from Bornova, it means.
Okay.
Which is like, they usually do kind of like sweeter styles of wines, but you can find drier styles as well. Because there's no appellation in Turkey, you will come across many different kind of styles. And I think those 2 are the white grapes that I would, recommend to come across. But of course, feel free to explore more.
I think the thing is that what I've heard is that Olus does a cracking Chardonnay.
Yeah.
I know, as one of the international grape varieties that she does grow, it's meant to be unbelievable. So it's had very good reviews, in terms of wine awards and competitions and things like that. So not that we're talking about indigenous, we're only talking about indigenous, but it's worth.
We're allowed.
We're
talking about the wines of Turkey. There are indigenous grape varieties, and I guess Chardonnay probably for the whites is number 1 planted, isn't it?
It's one of the number 1. It's quite common.
Now, is that Chardonnay planted in the volcanic soils?
Yes, it is.
Oh, I'm so excited. Now does the Chardonnay on volcanic soils taste anything like Chablis?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That's the whole nother.
Listeners, we shall have to find out. Part 2 is coming up next week, and we will be jumping to the red grapes. Have you heard of KK? That is the easier way to say, rather than its full name, which I hope I don't butcher, Kalecek Karase. Now, this is one of the most widely known grapes in Turkey, but one that was almost extinct in the 1970s. So you need to come back next week to know more. But before we go, as always, a wine quote. As the legendary wine writer Hugh Johnson once said, In wine, we find the story of civilization itself. I think this quote works quite well for this episode, exploring Turkey's deep-rooted winemaking heritage, a living testament to the very origins of wine itself. Thank you, you lovely people, for listening. If you're enjoying these episodes and getting value, the best way you can support my work is to leave a review, especially on Apple Podcasts, or some stars on Spotify. Share with your wine-loving friends and put up a direct link on your social media channels so people can just click and listen. Now, just as wine carries the story of civilization, may your week be rich with history and full of discovery. Love and light to you all. Until next Monday, wine friends. Cheers to you.